Hey everybody, I am super thrilled and excited because my friend, former teacher, which feels weird to say, doesn't it? Just a wonderful all-around, wonderful musician and person, Garth Bardsley is here all the way from the UK. Hi, Garth.
Hello.
I have been working on my British accent. It's absolutely awful. It's terrible.
Well, it's better than the American one, so hang on.
Why don't you just give us like a 30-second, who are you?
When I was a chorister at Manchester Cathedral, I got into trouble I wanted to leave or something, and the organist at the time said, you've got to be careful, Garth. This was to an 11-year-old child. If you don't engage and focus on one thing, you'll end up as a jack of all trades. And this thing has stuck with me all my life, that I'm a jack of all trades and not a master of any. And actually, I prefer to think of myself as a bit of a Renaissance man. Because, I'm an award-winning opera director. I have taught you in America, in 2 universities in America. I've got a university positions here in Britain. I'm a published author, a lyricist, librettist, poet. I work with 2 wonderful composers, and I've had a very busy acting and singing career throughout my entire life, where I've done opera, musical theatre, and to this day, I still do quite a lot of session work with London Voices. And we do a lot of film tracks, but we also do stuff for video games as well.
It is crazy. You were the first person, I remember, because when I was knee deep in opera at that point, I was super obsessed with opera. That was, I think, my junior year of undergrad. And I remember you were the first and only person to be like, hey, this is not going in the direction you want it to go. We need to adjust some technical things. And I was like, uh-oh. And I remember I was like, yeah, I like this guy because he told me the truth, and I trust that. So I've never forgotten that moment in the cafeteria where you were like, so you said it sounds like you're singing with marbles in your mouth.
Yeah, never known for my tact. But the thing is, Marco, what I heard in you was, you had this wonderful Italianate sound. It was sitting there waiting to happen. And you had the physique, and you had the tessitura, you had the height and everything. Yeah. But it was going nowhere. It was sort of just going round and round in your head. You did wonderful things, and you became a great singer in your own time. So fantastic.
What do you think of that?
Love it. When we do all these sessions with choirs in it, often the choir is so far back in the final mix, you don't get it. It's something there. Yeah. But it's nice when the choir's really up front. I was doing one a couple of years ago, and London Voices were the very, very first choir to ever sing on a James Bond film track. And we did, I forget which one it was, about 3 back, 2 back, or the one that's going around Rome. Ben Parry, who runs it, convinced the guys, said, look, you're in Rome. Why don't you have a choir? Think about St. Peter's. Why do they choose that sort of sound? So you've got this plain song at the beginning. As soon as I heard it, I thought, oh, this is going to move into something because it's being sung regularly, so it's in a regular beat. Whereas plain song is much more fluid and will taper away and then come back and sort of comes and goes a little bit. The fact that it was actually being sung rhythmically and consistently started to create tension. So you actually started to feel that this tension is building up. And then, of course, when you have that break and then it suddenly cuts back in and you've got all the stuff going on in the background, it's great. And then plain song itself, suggests The Exorcist. It suggests something holy and evil. There's some strange things. Why do we hear choral music in that sort of vein and think of devils rather than whatever. So it has that wonderful quality, a kind of holy ritual kind of heavy music has this dark quality to it as well. This sort of fearful thing that sets your nerves on edge and that sort of stuff. Because there are human voices involved, I think there's a sort of sense that something's at stake, something real is at stake. It's not just music to make you feel something. It's like, oh, these people are getting excited. These people are sounding desperate. These people are sounding ecstatic or whatever. So it's sort of, not sort of, it really does connect with in the human level.
It does. See? I talk the same way, everybody. We're on the same wavelength. It's a duel between you, who a very good fighter pilot, and this like king of the skies, essentially, who is incredibly good. And they're using his movements and stuff to create drones and so on and so forth. That sound of the that jet engine sound, these little things that we use in music to enhance that feeling, usually of tension, but they're all sorts of different emotions. It's just
also,
really...
So that when the bassist suddenly did that very long hell bottom C or whatever it was, and they just held it, that sort of went from a kind of church feeling or a Western ritual into something primitive. It suddenly moves into something much more guttural. You feel like you've suddenly been launched into an ancient Egyptian or some crazy Indiana Jones movie or something where people are going to be slaughtering people or making sacrifices or something. It is that frame of reference what the composers are constantly playing with in commercial music like this. They're not just going into it with a sort of, oh, I quite like the idea of doing this. There's a real sense of, okay, I want to create a musical world that is a frame of reference that people will recognize. So it throws them, it's playing with your brain, and it puts you into a particular place so that you're receiving the other information with this other reference going on.
So before we keep listening to amazing tracks with Garth, I wanted to let you know that this video has been graciously sponsored by NordVPN. So I have a little bit actually of a cautionary tale. 4 months ago, I had a vacuum purchased under my account. I had someone send somebody $1,000, and I had a credit card be used for about $2,000 on Amazon. I didn't know what to do, and I was scrambling, and I looked up VPNs, and I happened to find NordVPN, and I was convinced that their services were awesome. And I decided to download NordVPN and NordPass, which is their password lock. And I have to say, honestly, it has been a total game changer for me, and I feel a lot safer. I didn't even realize what VPNs were until all of this went down. It was terrible, hugely stressful, and it would have saved me a ton of hassle had I known and used NordVPN at that time. The thing about the internet these days is that there are a ton of ways to get your information stolen online. There's man-in-the-middle tactics where, there's public Wi-Fi when people create fake networks and you think they're real, and next thing you know, they have your data. There's phishing. Oops, not that kind of phishing. Phishing attacks involve getting you a message from a company you trust. It's like, click here if you want to, log into your account because we need to access whatever. And you end up giving away your password information without realizing it. It would be like if I texted you, click here to subscribe to Marco Meatball, except it was actually a hacker. And you're like, oh, Marco Meatball, sure. And you click on it, and all of a sudden now a hacker has your information. It's super easy to do that if you're not paying attention. Password attacks are super common too, which is actually what happened to me. Sometimes the site that you use will have their data compromised and all the information gets leaked out, and unfortunately using the password Marco Meatball is cool one too many times probably got the better of me in this case, and they figured out that I used it for many other sites, caused a whole bunch of problems for me, and it took a long time to get settled. Anyways, there's a lot of ways in which people can mess with your internet privacy. That's why NordVPN is actually so awesome. Man-in-the-middle attack? NordVPN encrypts your online traffic to ensure no one is spying on your sensitive data. Phishing? NordVPN has a threat detection feature that will recognize fake or malicious links and warn you about the difference between Marco Meatball and Marcos Meatballs. So that way you don't actually share something private with the wrong people. I feel so much safer thanks to NordVPN and NordPass, and I make passwords that are so long, no one could possibly figure them out. And half the time I can't, which is why NordPass is so awesome. So that's why I'm grateful that NordVPN actually chose to sponsor this video, because I believe it's a really important tool, and I wanted to share the good news with you. Users right now can get a huge discount actually with the purchase of a 2-year plan plus 4 months free. Use my link, www.nordvpn.com/MarcoMeatball to get extra subscription time. Try it risk-free now with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Thanks again to NordVPN for sponsoring the video, and let's head back to Garth and listen to more awesome video game music. This is by Chris Christodolo. It's called The Rain, formerly known as Purple, which is an homage to Purple Rain by Prince. I'm sure you know that song. That wasn't like an age comment, just for the record. Just saying.
You've heard of the Beatles, haven't you?
But this
is by Mozart. That's not an age comment.
I love the homage to Prince there, though. That thematic recap of that melody is so satisfying, especially when you clue into what it is.
Yeah, it went above my head, I'm afraid. So
it was near the end. Yeah.
I kind of got it. I got the idea. Were you aware from when you were a child the sort of the effect the music was having on you?
Not until I started playing Final Fantasy games. I would actually attribute Final Fantasy, the series, musically being the reason for why I went into classical music. So, no, I didn't realize it until it had happened.
I often think that National Music Days should be National No Music Days, so people actually sit and realize that if you take away music from everything, TV, radio, cars, lifts, superstores, whatever it might be, what is the experience? What is a world without music? We abuse it so much that the nature of music, it's because it's so important, it's there all the time. Because of the different instrumentation, so the fact they were using the real thing or a digital version of Yamaha C3 organ with the Leslie speakers, instantly gives you a kind of jazz, 70s, gospel, 80s, all that sort of stuff. I love that sound. The fact that it was absolutely a kind of standard rock ballad feel, the slow rock ballad, and the fact that essentially it was a repeated four-note structure over and over again, a kind of ground bass. And I was thinking as well, this rock thing, which is this ground bass essentially, the bass just does the same thing all the way through. People had cottoned onto this several hundred years ago, Purcell and Bach and people. Repetition, it gives you a kind of security. You know that it's going to be built on above, and that the harmonic varieties that are going to go above it and the colours add to the sort of tension and the excitement. So Tubular Bells is one, this is very much Tubular Bellish. Tubular Bells goes on and on and on and on and on and on. He just keeps adding instruments, and he announces them, which makes it even Tubular Bells, slightly distorted guitar. And you listen to this day and go, I so love this. It's so exciting. It sort of just gets me, and I remember listening to it as a kid. This is exactly what this does. It essentially has this very simple ground bass, da-dee-da-dum, and that's mirrored in the final of all the solos, all the bits they have da-dee-da-dum at the end of each section, so which you can kind of hook into. It's then going to be repeated the next 7 bars or 16 bars, and those standout guitar solos are pure 1980s.
Which is actually an interesting point about how electric guitar, melodically speaking, is actually in some ways even more to me is actually more enticing than the voice sometimes, because of the range of that electric guitar. It's like such like a tenor key type thing, but it also is so incredibly satisfying. And I feel like the emotional output of an electric guitar as it ascends up is so incredibly emotional.
I think it's the same as a violin, isn't it? You've got the violin.
Yeah.
You can play pretty low on a violin, but then you can get stratospherically high. And so that stretch, I think you're absolutely right. I'd never really thought of it like that, but I think you're right. And that sort of plaintive cry that the electric guitar can have can really tune you. When it's great, it's really good. Serious question here, because I've never played games like this at all. I don't know. Don't you get a bit bored of just having endless battles, constantly battling?
Depends on the stakes. Sometimes, yes. That larger dragon is named Bahamut. He was actually our ally, but he has been consumed by this energy of this crystal, and he's become sort of mad. And in that moment, he accidentally murdered his own father. So we're trying to stop him because obviously he's about to destroy the whole world because he's just like, and he has no control. And these two brothers have been separated for like 12 years, I believe. And so they merge into one and they fight together for the first time. So in that moment, it's pretty exhilarating. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it can get a little long for sure. I mean, that battle in particular is actually like a full 10 minutes or longer.
So when you're playing it, that music kicks in. So you're it's riding along to that music.
Dynamic, I guess. It's so like if something happens all the time in video games. It happens in this game actually. Like you'll be walking along and there's like forest music, and then you enter into a battle and it's the forest music slightly modulated and slightly thematically changed so that it becomes battle music. So anyway, to answer your question, yeah, sometimes. But that's also why people like it. You know, in this particular case, that's a very story-driven game with the emphasis actually on the story.
In medieval times, if you go to the cathedral, Albi in France, and one of the end, there's an extraordinary Day of Judgment murals on the wall, these great, enormous things, 100 feet high. And on the left-hand side, as it were, you're tumbling down into hell, and you see all these terrible, ghastly, gory things going on. And then on the other side, you see you're rising up to the right hand of God, and you're going to sit on the right hand of Jesus. Or something. It's absolutely aimed at an illiterate, uneducated congregation coming in, and they sit, and when they look at these stories, and they say, if you're bad, you end up on that side, right. And if you're good, you end up on that side. And so much of these video games seem to be essentially that sort of illustrative, religious-themed, good, evil, some sort of morality against immorality, some sort of, challenge. I mean, is it becoming a kind of pseudo-religion, this kind of thing, that you buy in, you're up to 35 years of Final Fantasy and you're still battling with good and evil. It's a kind of endless religious experiences in some ways.
I mean, not all games are like this, obviously, but in the case of Final Fantasy, yeah, there's always this moment where you are fighting a big bad, and the music, I'm sure you sang One Winged Angel on that concert you did. Or in Final Fantasy VI, you fight literally a clown, a jester that becomes a god, and he destroys the planet, and a bunch of really messed up shit happens because of him. It's got organ music in it. It's 13 minutes long, and people revere it. Yes, of course. In Final Fantasy, in general, there's always this conflict between good versus evil. Being a part of the fan base, there is a certain degree of, I wouldn't want to call it religiosity, but there is certainly something that is appealing about that quality of good versus evil. Do
you think that's because you can actually do something about it? You can actually win?
Maybe, yeah. For me personally, I don't know. That's a really interesting question because I've never even asked myself why I love those games so much. If we're looking at it from a psychological perspective, yeah, probably. I mean, the idea that like at the very end, it's also a formula. You're going to fight the big bad, and that is satisfying when you beat it. And then also the music happens to be very good, and that is one of the main reasons why I play it.
I just wonder whether it's a sort of comfort place in a way, a place that people go to because actually there's some sort of recognized...
When you phrase it like that.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, in a way, organized religion's a bit like that. It's a place of security and repeated stuff and safety and all that stuff.
I think also connection to characters. I used to watch The Office every time I was depressed because like connecting with those characters would somehow like fill some void. So I suppose in theory, yes. I mean, that's actually a really interesting point for the comments. If you want to, how do you connect to Final Fantasy? If you connect to Final Fantasy, be curious to see what other people's responses are. different kind of battle theme?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that just as a piece of music, apart from those little sections where it takes off and does something entirely different, I can imagine in context it's great, it's exciting, but it's sort of very, very basic music, just produced at a very high level. So you can just throw things at it. As soon as he got away from the endless a nice little key change at one point, but it only lasted about 3 seconds. That's when my ears pick up. That's when I get excited. Why haven't I listened to rock music in my life? It's because I actually get bored of the repeated ballad and just the chorus going round and round and round. I just get bored of it. So I listen to jazz, because jazz doesn't go round and round. It does. It goes in different places. For me, that was kind of boring, but beautifully boring.
That's fair, and I think that there's a lot of hype around that, and I think in context it makes a lot more sense. There are other tracks, if there's time, that I can show you from that area of the gaming world that are pretty interesting.
A paper while building a dam. They are flooding circuits to find who I am. Make a list, write it down in time. Now take every part of me, take it all and put it together like building a boat. Cheers as the horns resound. Tackles those who drown, carrying myself out. Dream of days, tears of keep it calm, be afraid to rattle the cage. Take a risk, take a dive, take it down. Suddenly surrender, take back everything. From the open shore I will learn to fly, soaring past the great divide. Voices that surface seem to call out all the lies. From the open shore I have learned to fly, soaring past the great divide. Voices that surface seem to call out all the lies.
That was like Little Mermaid on acid. I kind of hated that.
Did you? Did you?
It didn't know what it was doing. It just seemed like it was, Little Mermaid, Lloyd Webber, Queen, that whole Queen choral sound thrown into a mixer, add a bit more, mix it all together, add a bit of Irish folky kind of quality to the voice, and you just, what the hell was that?
I respect that. I love it, but I totally...
Strip it away.
Yeah,
I was hoping it would stay in 7/8, but it didn't. It shifted to 6/8, and that was a shame, because all the opening sequence was in 7/8. It was going da-da-dee-da-ba-da-dee-da-da-dee-da, and then it went da-da-dee-da-da, and off it went. Interesting, though. I mean, it's an interesting world, isn't it? Suddenly you're, again, why not? And if that leads you towards another kind of musical experience, why not?
Yeah. Well, then let's have a palate cleanse.
I think one of the problems with listening to track after track after track, you start to hear the repetitions and the sort of
the patterns.
The tricks that people use all the time, because they kind of work, I guess. Because it keeps repeating, it never gets anywhere. It never really develops. You never get beyond the opening sequence. And it's a pretty tune, and that's nice, and it starts quite nicely. But then they repeat it. Oh, and then they add a violin, and they repeat it, and then you just keep going around, and you never actually develop. It never develops. It's just a series of variations. But the quartet was a nice touch. That little classical quartet at the end was rather sweet. The thing that I find frustrating, even when I'm doing the gigs myself and performing, is the quality of the orchestration. And remember, often you have a composer, and then you have a whole series of orchestrators. So there's, what you're hearing, that's not what the composer didn't want. It is what they wanted. They've made it very clear to the orchestrators what they're looking at and everything, and then the orchestrator delivers it, and then the composer tweaks and decides whether it's what they want. To do with a video game, you will have lots of orchestrators working for the main composer, and so sometimes you get fantastic orchestrations. I mean, really, truly, beautifully spaced, really intricate, interesting ideas coming through, exquisite solos, all this sort of stuff, and nice combinations, which is the work of the orchestrator. We forget that. We should credit them more. Even Stephen Sondheim, it's his orchestrators, the Jonathan Tunicks of the world, who made that sound, who created, in a sense, the Sondheim sound that we know so well. It's as much about them as it is about Sondheim himself. So what frustrates me is you get clearly these very excellent, wonderful, gifted, knowledgeable musicians and orchestrators limiting themselves with this small world that they occupy, this little, 4-note theme, a 4-note bass that goes round and round and round, and you never get away from it, and the harmony never develops. So after a bit I sort of go, come on, I want something more. I want a bit more meat on the bone. And sadly, apart from the violin solo, probably the piano and the quartet, the rest of it was synthesized, and it was and it sounds a bit ugly because of that. I am a bit of a snob at times. I am opinionated, but I'm allowed to be. I've had 30 or 40 years in business, so it's not. I don't have to like everything, but I do have to be a bit careful, because sometimes I'm a bit dismissive, and I don't like being that. But when you've heard, and I'm dismissive of classical music, I'm dismissive of jazz sometimes, because I think we've been there, we've done that.
You bring up an interesting point to me, though, because it's like, I don't really have like negative opinions about a lot of this music. And a lot of times I listen to it and I'm like, I love that. Here's why. And I'm not trying to appease the audience, because they are okay with criticism. So it's sort of interesting to have you have such strong opinions, and for me to be like, every piece is valid and I like it for what it does.
I am critical by nature, and I've spent my life doing this and being in the world of music. So I guess if you're a chef and someone hands you a fairly basic cheese sandwich on a slightly
you're going to see the benefits of how good a cheese sandwich
is. You're going to go, this cheese is, it's not good, and the bread is stale. Thank you, I'll eat it. I'm hungry. And I can imagine this is suitable if you're out for a walk on a mountain and you need some food. But there's better food out there. And so I think, it doesn't hurt to be a little bit choosy. I think what's really important is, I think it's very good that you say, what do you like? What I teach my students is to be critical, to be able to critique things. So when you like something, you don't just say, I like it. You then ask yourself why you like it. And if you don't like something, you're not allowed to say, I don't like it. You're allowed to say, I don't like it because this didn't do it for me because. You have to be specific. So I know why I don't like this stuff. I know why it doesn't do anything for me. And as I explained, for me, it's repetitive. It's slightly empty. It's a little bit like a gilded piece of tin. Essentially you've got this bit of metal, and we've now put some nice, pretty, plasticky rhinestone things on it, and it's a bit better. But it's still just a bit of basic metal. Whereas some of the stuff you played earlier, even though, yes, it was derivative, yes, it was pastiche, yes, it was, using stuff before, it was imaginative. It was clever. It was imaginative. It was very vibrant in its orchestrations. It was interesting how it developed, how it grew, how it expanded. I also think that sound, that whole piano thing, has been toxic in movies now for about 30 years. You get that moment where the piano kicks in, and you just go, oh, really? Really? Do I have to listen to a mournful, melancholy piano solo, which is going to last, and it's about 8 notes and going to last 4 minutes? When was that one recorded?
2008.
God, it's been going that long. I did 2 World of Warcraft
Did you?
recordings. Yeah, several. So about 2015, 2016.
What? Oh, I wonder what expansion that was. That's cool. So you understand like the musical style of this, obviously.
Hasn't moved on at all in 10 years.
I mean, I think they just tried some new stuff with the new expansion, Dragon something. But yeah, I mean, in general, it's very like choral heavy and very like orchestral.
That is absolute. I mean, it does what it says on the tin. That's so typical of the stuff we've done over the last 12, 15 years of that chorally big epic, but very, very simple over a rhythmic bass that's pounding away. It works. And you'll hear that in the Da Vinci Code, you'll hear that in James Bond or whatever, or Mission Impossible. That's exactly that sort of sound. We get this kind of epic choral thing in the background with this. Again, it just raises the stakes. It suggests there's something more important than the individual. There's something epically worldly or godly or holy or heavenly or something. In a way, they're all trying to capture the Carmina Burana element. Ba, 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 beep, boom, boom, boom,
yes.
ba, da, dee, da, da, boom, boom, ba, dee,
yeah. I do want to ask you really quickly, like, has this changed your perspective on video game music at all? Like, what has this sort of like listening to all of this in sort of one fell swoop sort of done?
So I haven't been surprised by anything in the sense of, oh, that's a really different approach and sound. Everything you've played in a way today, I've sort of done, apart from that crazy Disney thing. Although we did do the re-recordings of Beauty and the Beast for the new release. We did all those things. What I've enjoyed about this is, the music is the music, and none of it surprised me. I've liked some of it very much, and I've been and in a kind of tubular bells kind of way, I've gone along with it. It's exciting stuff, and it's and beautifully put together. What is interesting, I think, for me, is that actually just considering it, what it's trying to do, what its aim is, who it's trying to entertain, attract, engage, what it's trying to do for those people who presumably are aged 12 through to 92 or something, this kind of enormous breadth of user. And the cultural references that it's using, the musical references, the historical references, are clever. There's a lot of clever stuff happening. And even the stuff I really didn't like, there's some clever stuff, the fact you use a quartet, the fact you move into a Mendelssohnian sort of world suddenly, just triggers things. Even if you don't realize it, it puts you into the parlor, it puts you into a place of refined company. Yeah, some of it I belittle and dismiss, but actually it's still doing the job it's set out to do. The Purple Rain stuff, I think, was that track I really liked enormously. It would be exciting if just occasionally, these composers really did step out into their or a comfort zone they really want to step into and bring us, because there's a lot more references out there. I mentioned Michel Legrand before. I listened to about 2 hours of him yesterday when I was painting. And he's repetitive. Oh my God, he's repetitive. But is it beautiful? Exquisitely so. Is it from the heart all of the time? Is it very French? Yes. Does it move me, excite me? Yeah. And I'm sure if people are listening, and I think what you're doing here on your podcast and things is just fantastic, because if people go back to their games and then and stop playing for a minute and lose, presumably get killed or something, but if they stop and go, oh God, Marco said this and that geezer from Britain said that, and that's really interesting because I just heard it for the first time. I just heard that noise, that sound, that layer. I can hear what they're trying to do now, and I've been distracted, and you've ruined the game for me forever. That's fantastic, isn't it? I think because it is there. None of these people doing this are anything less than very talented.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the point. They really are. I read something recently about maybe some of your listeners and viewers will know Ravel's Bolero that goes round and round and round. There's a simple theme, a double theme. 20 odd bars. The drum goes all the way through it. 171 repeats on the side drum. That's terrifying. Even more terrifying is the guy who has to join him halfway through.
Yeah, the other guy. Yeah.
But this piece goes on, and it's very, very famous. But what it's really famous for at its time was he was coupling instruments that had never been coupled before. So he'd stick a piccolo with a trombone or a clarinet with a thing and a harp. And suddenly you get these, and he puts them in fourths and fifths. So you get these overtones, these harmonic overtones, which sound oriental, they sound magical. No one had ever done this before. They'd never put, a clarinet with, a bassoon at a particular interval doing. That's what makes that piece utterly, utterly remarkable and listenable to because it's brand spanking new. So glad we ended with that one.
Yeah, I know. I was worried.
That was great. I love that. I love it. Why do I love that? It's a mixture of the Addams Family, Wednesday, the good, the bad, and the ugly, French influences, definitely a bit of Michel Legrand in there. And it's comic. To me, that feels like a comic caper kind of movie. Sherlock Holmes, that could be that sort of thing. It's got period quality to it. It could be an 18th century Netflix production with jazz guitar or rock guitar attached. I mean, that was just fun. That was like they were having a lot of fun. Lots of stuff happening in the orchestra, lots of lovely... And that single tubular bell, the dong, just immediately says to me, cowboy, western. The lovely cascading violins is funny. It's funny. It's mischievous and
extremely so.
It feels like an art movie, an art robbery or something. It could be that all that sort of stuff. It meshes a beautiful piece of art that's 18th, 17th century. So you've got your harpsichord, you've got the beautiful buildings, you've got the geezer who's going to do all the bad stuff with the guitar, and you've got the police chasing. It's just, there's a whole world to me that, that's great, right? Who wrote that?
His name is Yupeng Chen. It's a part of he's a Chinese composer. This was a limited time event too. That's what's crazy. It was over in 2 months, and then it was done. And then that music never existed in the game again. That's the kind of commitment. It's not afraid to be experimental, and it's actually...
No, it's great. It's funny. I like that very, very much. Really
cool.
did.
Garth, thank you so much for, coming on, giving your thoughtful opinions, both on the positive side and the negative side. I think that's healthy and beneficial. And thank you everybody for watching this. If you enjoyed this, definitely feel free to like and subscribe, support the channel. If you want Garth to come back and we'll torture him with more eclectic music, let me know in the comments.
I'm on for it. It's been great. Thank you so much, Marco. It's been this has been a real lovely journey. I loved it. Really great fun. Good. And and hello to all you amazing people out there who are listening to this stuff. Fantastic. And learning from Marco. Brilliant. Love it. I did my job. I taught him. I did my job.
Thanks everybody, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.